Welcome back to Nuts and Bolt Sports. Rod, Jordan, Henry here, as always, talking the NBA. We're less than a month away from basketball already being back. That's kind of insane. And we covered a lot of ground in the free agency in just like 2 episodes because all that stuff sort of like was jam packed as it often is into that week. So this week was not really all that busy on the news front, but we did get a couple of updates. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And I think the biggest thing, we'll talk about preseason here at the end of the episode, but let's start with the health and safety protocols, because this is something that's top of mind it's been top of mind since the NBA planned its return to the bubble. And then there was the question following the success of the bubble of, okay, good job, Adam Silver, pat on the back, whatever you want to call it. How are you going to do it once you actually have to travel and expand outside Disney World? This is no longer the most magical place on earth. Now you're going from city to city. Teams are not playing in their normal arenas. There's a lot of factors that go into this. Before I get into like the protocols and certain highlights of all this stuff, like Jordan and Henry, for both of you, like what's your sort of like nerve level on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of where the season kind of stands, because we're kind of, we're on the hinge, or we're on the fringes of like one of the more hectic situations here in the NFL with the Steelers Ravens game, which has been pushed to Wednesday, and this is sort of one of the bigger epitome of cases that has sort of struck the NFL, which I think is the closest comparison point to the NBA in terms of travel and whatnot. Where are you guys feeling after where we stand right now with all this?
Go ahead, Henry.
I mean, what we're talking about, honestly, like just seeing the discrepancies and I guess you can call it the failures of like other leagues and predominantly the NFL. I'm kind of nervous for some players that were sketchy first about the bubble because they realize they do have families, like I was thinking about the whole Avery Bradley situation. He did opt out of the Lakers, who ultimately won the championship. But he did it because his son has like a respiratory disease or like respiratory illness and everything. So these players have more people to worry about themselves, like to worry about like outside of their bubble, about outside of their team, outside of their staff and everything, because they do go back home to their families and everything. And now that they're traveling and risks are just much higher. I believe in Adam Silver for doing the right thing. And like, let's say if there's an outbreak let's say on the Lakers or the Celtics or whichever team, games won't necessarily be pushed back to like, let's say, like postponed for 2 days and then we'll continue again with the same players and stuff like that. That's where we're seeing like the failure in the NFL. That's why there's so many outbreaks and stuff. And hopefully the NBA can look at them as an example of what to do better. Because it's scary because things are getting predominantly worse again. When it comes to this whole thing, yeah, there's like talks about a vaccine coming very soon and everything, even like mid-December, but distribution is going to take a while. So until that really formulates all together, there's still so many protocols and so many risks at large that it does get me a little nervous, because I know we're just the commentators and the fans and everything like that, but you kind of do worry about these players, especially because I forgot, I think it was with one of our colleagues, Warren, that he talked about like it's always going to be about the money, like if it wasn't for the bubble, the NBA was going to lose a projected $1.5 billion. And they invested $150 million into that bubble project, which was successful to save more than $1 billion for the league and revenue and everything. Now, it's just, I think there's a moral case, there's an economic case, and then there's like a professional case of like how you deal with your staff and your players and everything. If I would have to rate it from a scale of 1 to 10 of how worried I am, I think in the NBA sense, I think a 6.5 or a 7, because I do have some worries. But what about you, Jordan?
Well, of course, Henry mentions the Lakers is the first team to have a possible outbreak, so no surprise there.
That's the Celtics.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm probably at like a 5. Obviously I agree with you in the fact that like this is getting a little bit worse, and it is going to get, a little bit more worse before it gets better. The thing that I guess makes me feel a little bit better is that the NBA has been on top of this like since this whole thing started, and they've done a much better job than a league like the NHL or NFL, has done, as evidenced by their rescheduling upon rescheduling. Not to mention too, like I think in the NFL it's even tougher because you do have so many guys on a team, and that's not their fault. That's just the way their rosters are structured. You have like 40, 50 guys depending on if you're home or away. So that does obviously play a bigger role, especially in the NBA where you only have 12 to 15 guys, depending on what your injury, statuses look like. So that part gives me like a little bit more ease. That there is a little bit more, I guess not more. There's gonna be less risk for people to be, testing positive and having to quarantine and stuff like that. And I guess the other thing too, I just kind of goes towards your economic point, is that yes, there will be a vaccine, and people are worried about the distribution. But I will tell you, the people who make this and who distribute it in the businesses, they will get it to the sports teams, and all the one percenters, they will get it. It's a business. They're going to want to keep the athletes paid, the actors and actresses paid, the music artists. They're going to want to keep the people that make a lot of revenue for the country going. So I feel like the NBA, along with the other major sports, are going to be getting the vaccine as soon as it's tested and cleared, and we know it has a 99 or 100% success rate. They're going to be getting it right away. So that does give me like a little hope, even though that sounds very crappy to say, that like people who are probably more needing of it are not going to be getting it first. But like you said, it's a business. So, I think the NBA is going to do a good job. There's going to be some weeks where, there's something could happen. It could be like an Anthony Davis or a Jason Tatum or somebody like that who maybe they don't even have it, but they came into contact, tested positive, and they have to miss a game or two. And that's just kind of what it's going to be like. We just kind of have to prepare for a very unique, probably an even more unique NBA season than what we just went through, which is hard to believe. But I think that's going to be the road that we're headed in. So we'll just have to see what happens from here and hope for the best. And, just trust in the fact that Adam Silver and these guys have been on top of it and have done a good job so far. And we just got to trust that they're going to continue to do that as the training camps and preseason open, and then the season starts in a little less than a month.
What's your number out of 10? Henry gave it a 6.5.
I say like a 5. Like I'm not like now if we start like the first week, if all of a sudden like they get into preseason games and things like we have these high numbers, that may change. But I have enough faith in what I said that I think we're going to be okay.
Obviously, I'm employed by the NFL, so I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment in a negative or a positive sense on the way that it's being handled. No, I mean, in all honesty, though, like, there are certain things that I know about that other people may not know about. There are certain things that other people may know about that I don't know about. Like, there's a whole, there's a whole thing to that. Mm-hmm. And what I can say is that the teams themselves, you see Denver's coach putting the responsibility on the players, not taking proactiveness and being responsible with the way that they're handling the entire situation, because they were not always wearing masks and following protocols the way that the league had sort of outlined for them to do. And that's the biggest thing going into this is, are our guys going to stick to what they need to stick to? Like, well, I'll read some of these protocols here in a second, but like, there's so many rules and regulations that are going to be placed on these guys, and you do have to make a sacrifice if you're going to be a professional athlete to follow and adhere to these rules. We didn't really have those rules being broken to an extreme extent in the bubble, but when you're outside the bubble, you include all these different factors. Like there's so much. It's so different traveling from city to city and even being at home as opposed to just being stuck in a Disney World hotel room. And it really does fall on the staff and the players first and foremost, because the NBA, similar to the NFL, came in here and established a certain guideline, certain protocol. Now it's up to the rest of the players if they want to follow it. If they choose not to follow it, they could have significant outbreaks like the NFL has had. If they choose to follow it, it could go as smooth as the bubble. You just don't know. When you're going onto the real world, there's going to be a handful of cases. It's inevitable. It's completely inevitable. But if the players are responsible with the way that they act, we can limit that number and make sure that it doesn't, knock out LeBron for a certain stretch of games or whatever it may be. You also have to look at some of these cities where cases are higher, and certain teams, like, we don't know what the deal at San Francisco. Obviously, the 49ers now have to go to Arizona to play their next couple games. We don't know what their home games are going to look like a couple weeks down the road, and that's when the NBA starts a couple weeks down the road. We don't know if Golden State's going to be able to play games in their home arena. What's going to happen there? Toronto already has moved down to Tampa. There's just so many factors that are up in the air. So I'll read some of these protocols now. I'm reading these from the article on NBA.com. Some of the highlights: occurrence of independent cases not spread among players or staff, or small expected number of COVID cases will not require decision to suspend or cancel the season. I think that's probably top first and foremost amongst most people's heads. Anyone who tests positive will have 2 routes to return. Go 10 days or more without 10 days or more after the first positive test or onset of symptoms, or test negative at least twice at least 24 hours apart via PCR testing. Any player who tests positive, even if asymptomatic, must wait 10 days and then be monitored for individual workouts for 2 days. There's no criteria mentioned for what might prompt the NBA to suspend. If there is, a major outbreak, we'll see what happens down the road there. Team traveling parties are limited to 45 people, including 17 players, and there's going to be an anonymous tip hotline similar to the way that there was in the bubble. I think the highlight here: how many times does James Harden get this tip hotline called on him? Because I'm over under. I know Jordan likes his bets. Over under 10. Over under 10.
Wouldn't be surprised if it's over. The one thing that is interesting, that I guess would, when I say it's a 5, I was very casual saying it's a 5 because I feel like I wasn't that worried. But the more you read about it, and kind of thinking about the way the NBA works as opposed to a league like the NFL, we're seeing an NFL week to week basis is so different because they play one game a week, right? They have all this extra time. In the NBA, even with the reduced schedule down to 72 games or whatever they're doing, you're looking at, still 3 games a week, potentially sometimes 4 if it's a busier schedule. And that, 10 days, even if it's asymptomatic, you're at 10 days. I mean, that's at least 3 games, 4, possibly 5. That may not sound like much in the beginning, but we get to that April, May, June range where you have the new playoff races forming and everything. And, the really good teams may be able to get by, like the Lakers and the Celtics and even the Bucks and stuff. If they're in a pole position, they may not, it may not affect them. But you look at a team like Phoenix, if Phoenix is chasing talking about them as a possible 7-8 seed, if they're in the midst of a playoff run with, Portland, a couple other teams come, those final 2-3 weeks of the season, and Devin Booker gets hit, and all of a sudden, boom, he's done for 10 days. That's critical. That could be a very serious thing. So that will be something to kind of monitor. And I'm hoping, you're right, that the players will take that seriously and try not to, go out and about and kind of break the protocols or just put themselves in situations that are, potential exposures, which it's tough. Because you are asking these people to just rearrange their lives, and they live obviously very nice lifestyles with nice houses and the option to do a lot of things daily that we don't, as normal people, don't get to do. So I know it's kind of tough for them, but at the end of the day, you are employed by the league. So I would hope that they're able to, come to some sort of agreement, at least amongst the team, right? You got to assume the team leaders, a guy like Chris Paul, a guy like LeBron James, they're going to speak up and, kind of have everybody in line. Houston will be a free for all, obviously, but you hope that the leaders take charge as well as, the teams to try to, prevent as much as possible because it could be damaging later in the year.
Yeah, I think the veteran leadership is pretty key here, and similar to the coaching situation that we've seen there in Denver, football side of it. We need players like that, or we need people like that in the NBA to speak up and from the get-go. And the NFL, props to them, again, my employer, so I don't know if it's not appropriate for me to editorialize positive or negative, but props to them for being the first out of the gate to really go with it, at least in terms of American sports and traveling around and whatnot. And to a certain extent, they were going to be a case study for a lot of these different leagues. And now the NBA is coming into this season with an example to lead by. Whether or not they choose to follow that, that's up to Adam Silver. Again, that's up to the coaches, that's up to the players. But there's enough of a sample size now for them to see what the positives and negatives are in both directions. Henry, do you have any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, actually, well, when we bring other sports into it, using them as examples, I'm sure the NFL will figure things out, and I'm sure even college football, who's having their own breakouts, are going to figure things out. Now, one of my biggest worries when I look at that, and then I look at the NBA, I look at we see not only players are getting infected, but also coaching staff. And when I think of coaching staff, I think of, who was in the bubble that was more secure? People like Greg Popovich, who's older in age and everything, but now he's outside of the bubble. Now he's traveling with the team. Now he's around more people that could be exposed too. So it's now you have a lot more vulnerable people that are in the league in terms of coaching staff or even the front office or whatever, that are going to be not in the bubble, so I think that's a huge thing to take into consideration, because Alabama football's head coach, he tested positive twice, and that's very worrying because he's also up there in age. So, I feel like that, well, from last I've heard, he should be doing fine, but it's worrisome, because there can be even more mistakes down the line for the NBA as well, because as Jordan pointed out, this might be even more of an experimental season than last season. And that's a lot to say, because last season was we're never going to see something like that again. But in terms of just figuring things out as the season goes on, I think that's going to be another challenge that even Adam Silver's and his whole collective unit are gonna have trouble like getting it to the dot. And it's not gonna be perfect, but we do think about the older because I don't want I don't want anything to happen to Greg Popovich. He's a good guy like down the road. But you think about that and stuff. But I think those are my final thoughts. Just make sure that the most vulnerable people in the league are the most secure.
That's a great point, actually, the asterisk thing, because that was the whole conversation going into the bubble was the season has an asterisk, the season has an asterisk. And like coming out of that, we saw what the level of play was, and people were like, no, actually, if anything, the Lakers were more deserving than any other finals candidate because of the circumstances that they were put under. I was waiting for that. I was waiting for Jordan to do something. But yeah, you do go into the season thinking that it is going to have a similar level of or more, I think, more scrutiny under it in terms of, is this season going to have the same sort of weight? That's very important, I think, to bring up. So thanks, Andrew, for bringing that up. Let's go ahead and get into preseason now. We got the layout of the schedule. We know that the NBA's regular season schedule is kind of being doled out in two different halves, but the preseason is more or less, a week or so of basketball, 49 games, up 2 to 4 games for most of these teams, at least one home game, one away game. There's, it's preseason, so there's not really a lot of weight behind these games. The biggest thing for me is the fact that there's no summer league right now, which would be our first look at the rooks. And so this preseason is going to more or less be their summer league, our first look at the rooks. And that's what I think is probably the biggest highlight of this preseason schedule. And we'll put like a link to this also. We can edit up the description to make sure we get a link to this so people know what the schedule looks like. But yeah, it's going to run from Friday the 11th of December through Saturday the 19th of December. And there's a bunch of games every team, like I said, is playing. So I'm excited to get our first look at some of these young guys who have not gotten the chance to play in the professional environment, considering especially they were just drafted like a week ago. Pretty insane that the swing is going to happen in just a matter of days, really. What are you thinking on this, Jordan?
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good point. This would be that time of the year, assuming we were on a normal schedule where we'd be watching, the whole Summer League tournament, which I do find fun. I know like not every NBA fan has to be like that hardcore in depth to watch Summer League, but like it is cool to see like these young guys like see who might have some flashes of talent and might be able to get some minutes early, and see who maybe may not be so good as we thought. I remember watching, not to bring them up again, like the Lakers a couple years ago, like when they had like Lonzo and Ingram and all these guys, and it was like a good test. Like I knew they weren't facing NBA players necessarily like on every roster during that time period, but you do get a little glimpse of like, oh, okay, like Lonzo's passing is going to translate to the next level. Or Ingram.
Was that the year they won the championship in the Summer League?
Yeah, they won it. And it was like, oh, okay. It was like when we first discovered, like, oh, Kuzma might actually be able to play.
And Josh Hart, right, was a part of that team, and I think he was a big surprise.
Yeah. Oh, we had all. It was literally every young guy that went. Pretty much everybody that went for Anthony Davis was there. But it was an interesting time to you see even like last year, like Ja Morant, those guys. It was cool to see them. So I think it's a good point. Preseason. I feel bad for them, right? They haven't had a chance to play March Madness. They haven't had a chance to, do like a lot of live workouts for coaches and stuff. Like they're basically just resigned to whatever they're doing one-on-one with their trainers and family and that kind of stuff. So somebody did mention it the other day on a podcast I was listening to, like prepare for this rookie class to struggle early and it not totally be their fault. Like I already said this was a weak class, but I'm not going to hold too much against them the first like month because they're coming in with, a couple days of camp, trying to assimilate into their professional careers, and then you got to play preseason for just a couple games, and then all of a sudden you're getting thrown out kind of into the proverbial fire. So like the top picks and stuff, like I wouldn't expect a lot right away. But I think the key for most preseason, for most of the teams is going to be, just building that chemistry as fast as possible. Even the team like the Lakers, who doesn't have any, rookies per se, they have a lot of new pieces. You have Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, Wes Matthews, a lot of new faces there. So they're going to have to develop chemistry in their own form as well. And then you obviously have, teams like the Warriors who are looking to incorporate Wiseman right away. So there's a lot of different scenarios, but chemistry building it takes, it takes most of the year anyway, right? It takes, teams a long time to get the plays down and get the feel for each other and their tendencies and what they do and do not like to do or where they want to be. So it's just kind of put them on a tougher path to achieve that right away. So we might see a little dip in play as well, which stinks because as you pointed out, we did see such a high quality in the bubble. But we're just going to kind of have to, that is what it is. Like we're just going to, persevere through it and just hope that, at some point in the year, everything starts to click, and we'll see that close to that level of play again.
What you got, Henry?
I think we're gonna be surprised again. Well, first of all, if I'm talking about the level of play, because when we went into the bubble, we were all super skeptical too about the level of play of like the bubble. Like it's not gonna be the same. It's a neutral ground. But honestly, I think we saw some of the best basketball we've ever seen in our life. So there's just so many what ifs going into even the preseason. It's like what maybe the rookies are gonna be more prepared than we think they are, and they're gonna showcase what they were able to do before March Madness got taken away from them, because these are perennial professional athletes now, and I know a lot of their fault in terms of not being as prepared as they want to be, because camp is so short. There's no summer league and anything. Preseason is still like sketching itself, so it's not going to be 100% their fault. And I agree with Jordan, this might not be the strongest class ever, but we've had even weaker classes before in the past 10 years that they've shown their signs of like having one or two all-stars or even superstars in that case. So, and we have some pretty big names, like as much as I give a lot of slander to, I do look forward to see a Devonte Graham and LaMelo Ball duo. As bad as the Knicks are, I'm really curious to see how Obi Toppin is going to do, especially coming in at 22 years old. So this rookie class is interesting in itself, and I feel like they're a guinea pig themselves, because this is the first like rookie class coming into this situation, because there's going to be so many implications for the years moving forward for the NBA, for everything that's happened recently. So this is the first class that's going to have to face those implications. In terms of this is a question I wanted to ask you guys, because now that we're using the example of like other leagues, not even the NFL like in specific, but is a preseason necessary at this point? Like, do you think the league can carry on without having a preseason, at least for this year, or do you think it's 100% necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. I actually would have preferred we don't have a preseason, because it also, as Jordan alluded to towards the top of the episode, it does increase the risk of some of these guys contracting COVID earlier in the season. Although I guess, if you get it after game one, maybe you can knock it out before the regular season starts. Maybe that's the mentality there. It definitely does pose the risk of an outbreak hitting the league earlier than we would have liked. And that's, I think, the biggest reason I would have said, let's limit the amount of games that we're playing and traveling as much as possible. That being said, I understand it, especially from that rookie and young player perspective, where you need to get these guys reps. And some of these teams, I mean, you look at Jordan's favorite guy, Alex Caruso. I mean, he made his name in summer league. He made his name in games that were not regular season impactful games. And these teams still have bigger rosters than they're going to have by the time December 22nd hits. They have to whittle them down. They have to figure out who's going to get the final spots. So from that perspective, I understand it. I don't love it, but it makes sense, I guess, especially considering it's only a week. Jordan?
Yeah, no, I definitely can agree with part of that side. Like, I mean, now coming from my end, like with teams like the Lakers and the Heat, like I've been saying it since season ended, that it kind of stinks that they have such a quick turnaround time just for their bodies recovering and just kind of mentally getting to relax. So it would have been nice for like those teams, kind of to have just an extra 2 weeks of training camp to, not have to go 100% and go out and play against everybody else. And, you risk the injury and you risk all this other stuff. And, it'd be nice for them to just sit there and build that chemistry and whatnot. But maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it helps. It's kind of the preseason for, their protocols in a sense too, where they get to see, hey, maybe we need to, we didn't have any major outbreaks, but, this certain travel system didn't work for this side of the country or whatever, situations may arise, or they might be able to tweak some things. That way it makes the regular season that much safer. Like it's one of those things, it's just, we don't know. It's all speculation. It's all just, making guesses and predictions to things we really have no idea about, but that's all you can hope for. But, thankfully it's not like a full preseason, because I do get kind of bored after when we do like 8 games normally. I kind of get bored by everything ready to go. But as I'm sure, like, the veterans of the league they don't really do a whole lot. So it'll be interesting, but hopefully something good comes out of it.
What I'm also like, considering the fact that, we're here recording this 11:30 and the season starts 12:11, like that's less than 2 full weeks from where we are now. And the one thing I hate about the off season, obviously having no basketball being the hardest part about it, but also like these storylines and these things that people just conjure up during the off season just get exhausting. And like, I'm kind of really happy that the season is starting sooner. I understand the frustrations of the timeline and whatnot, but like, I'm so glad I don't have to scroll through Twitter and see all these dumb think pieces about whether or not Andrew Wiggins is going to be the breakout player of the season and take over the league. Like, it's just like
every year.
It's every damn year, and it's just like, I'm so glad we haven't had that shit this offseason, because it's just like, I don't need that, and I'm sure it's healthy for the players, especially the rookies too. Like, you know, look at LaMelo. I'm sure if this was a regular offseason by mid-August or whatever, people would have been writing all these different articles about how his dad's going to screw up the Hornets organization and whatnot. And now he can just kind of dig his head straight into basketball and not have to worry about it. There's no turnaround or anything like that. He just goes straight into training and playing with his guys there in Charlotte, and he doesn't have to worry about the noise. And obviously LeBron too. Like, there's so much noise about LeBron and what you know, is it Wash King? Is it Wash King? Is it Wash? You don't have to deal with that this offseason, and we haven't had it yet. You know, it could still come falling down in the next 10 days or so. But I haven't seen it, and I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah. It'll be interesting too. You can talk about the rookies. You know, we've been talking about them all, you know, for the last 25 minutes here about, you know, them coming in and not having, you know, the summer camp and some of their times. I think even though the quality of play not be like at the highest level that we want, you will be able to tell who has been working and who is continuing to work up to these preseason and training camps, and who has maybe not worked as hard as they need to, because there's a fine line between taking time to build chemistry with your teammates and shaking the rust off of not playing in a collegiate or professional game in a lot of months. But there's also that line between that and then just like not putting in the full work. Like, you see a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who the Sixers took out of Kentucky. Like, I watched the video on him. He's been working out 2-3 times a day for like, you know, 5-6 hours out in LA for like the last 3 months. And like, he's probably going to come in a little bit more prepared than, you know, maybe some other guys will. And there might be some guys who aren't working as hard, and that's going to show too. So there is kind of like another side to it as well that I'm interested to see which rookies are putting in the work to come in ahead of the game, knowing that they have no summer league and a limited training camp in preseason.
Not just rookies. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say just not just rookies, also because I see Tyler Hero in the gym a lot, and he just came off of, you know, facing your guys in the finals. So it's like, who are the guys from the bubble that are gonna carry that momentum with them? Because, or was it like a one bubble, one hit wonder?
Do
you know,
think Jokic has done anything since like the regular season?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. Yeah, like. It's like, see, like, I remember
maybe like
like I remember when there was that
some guys that yeah, that's a good point. Like, you'll see some NBA guys too that like maybe. So I mean, I expect like the Lakers to kind of coast right away, but that's more out of like the LeBron is taking it easy here in year 7, 18. You know, relaxing a little bit more, and also the slightly underrated fact that Anthony Davis hasn't signed yet, but it's okay. He's going to. But we'll see if a guy like Andrew Wiggins has like put in the work of these last 7 months to actually take the next step in his development, or if, like, you know, that he hasn't. So yeah, that's a good point as well. It's not just, you know, relegated to the rookies.
See, and then what I remember is when there was that break from March to the NBA restarting, Jordan, you were like giving a lot of criticism to Danny Green, like, oh, well, you can tell he wasn't working during that time, right?
On Jack for
yeah, exactly. So like now I'm thinking about like, okay, who are the veteran players that are going to be a little complacent with, like, there's too many things going on for them to like put in the work, you know, because evidently that might have happened with Danny Green, and that's why we saw a drop in productivity. Do you think we're going to see that with other veteran players?
Not Alex Caruso, I'll say that.
Other decorated veteran players.
Yeah, I could definitely see it happening, especially in some of these markets where they just know they're not going to be playing for like playoff spots, and you know. I know some of these Cavs guys are out there in the gym. Like Kevin Love has been working very hard. He's been posting in the gym all summer. Andre Drummond is apparently out there shooting 3-pointers. I don't know if that's good or bad for the team. My guess is bad, and I expect teams, you know, picking again on my team, but I'm sure a lot of similar organizations, which we've alluded to on previous episodes, that have similar structures and people running them. I would imagine that there are other organizations like the Cavs that probably have guys that are just like, I'm out here in year 10. I'm making $10 to $15 million a year. I really don't give a shit. I'm not going to put in the energy here, honestly. Yeah.
No, you very well could see it. One guy that I thought of that he's not in the league anymore, but I think he totally would have done this, and he played for your Celtics, Henry. Antoine Walker, I feel like would have just been the laziest guy, because he was always like 5 pounds out of shape.
The man would have had COVID like 6 times in one off season because he would have just been out at bars and clubbing and gambling and all that.
Don't ask me why. Like I started thinking about it once we talked about it, but yeah, I think that he'd be the case study for the.
Honestly, I'm looking forward to those headlines because inevitably it's gonna happen. Where it happened in the bubble with Lou Will,
Lemon Pepper Lou.
Yeah, like those scenarios are gonna be so much more common now because there is no bubble. Things inevitably again down the line or within the next few months are going to start opening back up, and players are like, okay, I'm in Miami now. Usually I play in Minnesota, so like, why not? And then something happens, and then we're going to see probably the funniest headlines. I just want to see which players. I'm just curious.
Speaking of, I think it's not just going to be like self-reporting. I want to see in this age of social media who screws themselves over, and so who posts like the Snapchat, like Jack Harlow when he did that with Lou Williams.
Yeah.
Who is the first guy to take a Snapchat like at some place he's not supposed to be at, or someone screenshots his location or something? Because it's going to happen, right? With social media, people are naturally dumb with it since its creation. So I can only imagine that. I'm gonna have to make a list next time we're on of like which guy.
Yeah, that's a good topic. Yeah,
tune in next Monday for Jordan's top.
Yeah, that's gonna be because it's gonna happen.
Closing thoughts here, I guess. Is there like a highlight game in this preseason schedule that you're looking forward to, whether it be your team playing or like a rook that you're actually interested in seeing show work here to start off the preseason? Henry, I'll toss it to you first.
I'm excited to see the Nets. I'm excited to finally see Kevin Durant back on the floor. Doesn't matter to me who he faces. It's just like I want to see the dynamic between him, Kyrie, Caris LeVert, and all those guys. Not just a Kevin Durant and Kyrie team. They're really carried by their initial core, like those guys, the Caris LeVert, Jared Allen,
Joe Harris.
So I'm like, okay, how I want to see if it's gonna work fluidly, or if we're gonna see glimpses of what we always talked about in other episodes of like the Nets are gonna be an experiment that goes chaotic. So if there's glimpses of that, I'm gonna be like, okay, well, we called it. But if there's not, I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. So I think that's the thing I'm like mainly looking forward to for the preseason at least.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, they don't play any like marquee games. That Golden State plays the Kings twice and the Nuggets once, not on television. But I just enjoy seeing Steph Curry play basketball. Like I know he's in the division, but I've never like been a Steph Curry hater. I very much, enjoy watching him, and I feel bad we kind of got robbed of it last year with the hand injury and whatnot. So I know he's probably itching to get back out there after missing all that time and not making the playoffs. So I'm really, I feel like as much as I was dogging preseason for like it not really showing much, and like that's why I'm not picking any Laker games because they're just going to be like on cruise control. I doubt LeBron plays in more than one, but I'm interested to see if like these preseason games will show us like, ooh, like we could get Steph Curry like 30 points a game, kind of like back in 2016 type of range. Like I wonder if we're going to get a little taste, a little appetizer here to see if he's back because no Klay Thompson, so he's going to have to shoulder that scoring load even more unless Andrew Wiggins takes that next step.
Yeah, I don't see Andrew Wiggins taking that next step, unfortunately. But I'm glad you both brought up those two teams because that's exactly what I'm looking at. Yeah, we're not going to get the full power, but it is sort of like, it is a warm-up for guys like KD, Kyrie, and Steph who have missed so much time. It's going to be a warm-up for them to see whether or not they're at the level they think they are. Or there's still work to be done in a season where the circumstances may not allow you to get that work done. So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, these guys are going to come and talk themselves up, but Kyrie's out here like, talking himself up, saying that he feels like he has the burst and the speed and the agility the way he did back in his prime years in Cleveland. He said he hasn't felt that way since he played in Boston and in his first year with Brooklyn, although it was a shortened season. He said he just hasn't felt that same player. And I'm excited to hopefully see Kyrie get back to that level because when Kyrie is firing on all cylinders, he is my favorite player to watch play.
Oh, yeah.
So much fun. And between him and Steph, those two guys, like if those two guys are healthy, it's only good for the league, if we're being completely honest. I guess I'll close out by saying mark your calendars. Wednesday, December 16th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, Cleveland in New York. Get ready. The matchup of the preseason.
Everybody can leave now.
I had to do it. I'm sorry. I had to do it. That'll bring us to a close though for this episode. Thanks everybody for joining us. Yeah, be sure to visit that link down there. Check out our Team NBS merch, and also be sure to go back to last Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays ago, where we did our full draft coverage. We had some really great guests on who broke down the rooks that are coming into this season, how they played in college, and how they're going to fit into their new systems here in the NBA. So that'll give you a little bit more of a preview to kind of pair with this episode in terms of what we can expect to see in this preseason.